What I have right here is the Fox Float X2 rear shock. This is the new version of the shock from Fox, and I have this shock mounted to all of my bikes. I have it on the Levo and I have it on the Levo SL. I've tried all the shocks out there, tried all the ones from Fox, and this one is by far my favorite. So today I'm going to tell you why it's my favorite, and I want to show you how to mount it to your Levo and Levo SL. There's a couple different sizes out there, and I want to explain to you how to do that. I get a lot of questions on Instagram specifically from people. It's crazy. Almost every day people ask me, hey, how do you put that shock on your bike, and what's the best shock you can get, and what size do I do it? And people send me pictures of this shock in their shopping cart on Amazon, and they're like, what size do I get? So that's a really good question when it comes to the Levo and the Levo SL. So I'm going to answer that question for you, but I'm also going to walk you through everything about this shock and the bike and why I like it so much. Now, this one right here is the new version of the Float X2 from Fox. They just came out with this new version. It's got an updated damper, it's got an updated outside, the adjustments here in a little bit different position, new graphics. This one is greatly improved over the previous one. The previous one's great. I still use it, have that on my Kenevo and Levo SL, but I recently put this new one on the Levo and the shock's incredible. So the first thing we should do is talk about the sizing and what size of shock you should put on your Levo or your Levo SL. So the way the Levo or Levo SL comes out of the box, stock shock that's on it, Specialized specs the bike with a 210 by 52.5. 210 is the eye to eye, which is here to here, and then 52.5 is the stroke. Essentially, that's how far the shock compresses. Generally, that's what it is. So the bike comes out of the box with a 52.5. Now, if you go and purchase this shock from wherever you get it, Fox, Amazon, wherever you get it, you cannot select a 52.5. Specialized has a custom shock made for that bike. But what you can do is you can get this in a 210 by 55. Now, that's what I run here. Both sizes work great. You can do it in the 210 by 52.5, or you can do it in the 210 by 55. Everyone always asks me what size. I recommend the 55. So what that's doing is it has a slightly longer stroke, so the eye to eye, the length of the shock, does not change at all. Only the stroke changes. So what that means is you're getting a little bit more travel out of your bike with the same size eye to eye shock. It's very minor. It's very minor. The difference between 52.5 and 55 is close to none, but you actually can feel a difference. I've ridden the bike with both shocks on there, and you get a little bit more travel out of the 55. And I've done all the tests, let all the air out of it. The tire doesn't hit the frame. I've had no issues with the longer shock. So tried and true, tested by me. I recommend 55. So as far as the sizing, that's the size. And that is for the Levo and the Levo SL. They both use the exact same size shock. Now, when you get this shock and you put it in the frame, right away you're going to be like, oh my god, it doesn't fit. It does fit. It's a very tight fit. The sidearm on the Levo and Levo SL goes right there. So it looks very tight, but it actually does fit in there, and it doesn't have any clearance issues. I've been riding it for a while. I've been hammering on the thing, and it fits fine. There's no rubbing or anything. So it looks like a tight fit, but it fits. The Kenevo is different. Don't put this on the Kenevo. Okay, so that's the sizing for the Levo and the Levo SL. Now, I want to go over my adjustment settings that I have on this shock. PSI, high speed compression, low speed compression, high speed rebound, low speed rebound. All those are adjustable on this shock. It's a highly tunable shock, very confusing. But once you get it set right, it feels really good. So I figured if I give you my settings, that can be sort of a baseline for you to set yours up. Every rider's different, every bike's different. You may want a different feel out of it, so don't go using my settings, but this could be a good baseline for you to try out with your correct pressure, and hopefully it'll help you set up the shock better. So when you look at this thing, it's super confusing. There's a lot of adjustments on it. I won't go into the detail of what each adjustment does. That's a whole nother conversation on its own, but I will give you my adjustments where I have this set up right now. So the PSI I have here is 200 in this shock. I'm a light rider. I'm 135 pounds. So you're probably thinking, wow, that's a lot of air pressure. Well, it's not for this shock on the Levo and the Levo SL. And the reason is because the Levo and Levo SL have a high leverage ratio, which is great. That's the way the bikes work. So the shocks that come on the bike out of the box are tuned for that high leverage ratio. There's nothing wrong with putting one of these on there, but it is going to feel a little bit different. So you have to increase the pressure a little bit more than you would if you put this shock on another bike, a different company. So 135 pounds, PSI is at 200, and that's giving me roughly 20% sag. So set your pressure to your weight, 20% sag, and these settings should generally work for you. Okay, let's do compression first. So for my high speed compression, I am at 6 clicks. Now, let me specify, by clicks, I am talking about the same way that Fox describes this, which is the amount of clicks backed off from the fully closed position. So if you were to put your little adjuster tool in here and dial your knobs all the way in, let's start with this, we'll go on to this one. If you were to dial them all the way in and then back them out to the correct setting, that's the number of clicks that I'm talking about here. So for high speed compression, we're 6. Fully closed, 6 clicks out. And then for low speed compression, I'm at 9. For low speed rebound, I'm at 6. And high speed rebound is a little bit different. It's down here now on this new shock, and that is at 4. So these specific settings are specific to the new shock here. To the previous year Float X2, they're going to be very similar, but with the new knobs, the amount of clicks, I believe, are a little bit different. So for those settings, that's for the new current Float X2. So that's sort of a baseline for you to go off of. I would recommend putting those settings on your shock and giving it a try, seeing how that feels. I'm very sensitive when it comes to my shock. I think my rear shock and fork really are the most important parts of my bike. I'm constantly tuning them. You can do one little click of low speed or high speed and I feel it for sure. And even the temperature of the day, you know, if it's a hot day out, my fork feels differently, and I can totally feel that. So play around with your shock and adjust these things, and the more you get used to adjusting it, the better you will be able to adjust the shock. Like I said, this thing is very adjustable, and it's a little confusing at first, but when you wrap your head around this thing and you actually adjust it right, it's unbelievable. This shock is incredible, and I always tell people, everyone's getting Levos around me. I have all my friends are getting Levos, and I have people sending me messages, and Levos are like going crazy right now. And I always tell people, the number one thing you can do to that bike, the best thing you could do, is put this shock on the back of it. It's the Fox Float X2. Set it up right, and I guarantee you it will completely change your bike. It will feel like a new machine. It's incredible. This thing's very sensitive and has the right amount of progression on it, and you'll love it. And before I wrap this up, I should briefly say, I mentioned it earlier, but I have tried a lot of different shocks on this bike, and the reason I like this one the Float X2 as opposed to the Coil X2 is the Float is a little bit more progressive. So an air shock naturally is more progressive than a coil spring. So the way the suspension works on the Levo and the Levo SL is it's sort of a linear design. The suspension is just linear, which is great. The bike works great. But when you put a coil shock on an already linear suspension design, depending on what you're riding, for me, it's a little too linear. You kind of blow through travel really easily with a coil shock. So that's the reason I do an air shock on the Levo or the Levo SL, is because an air shock is a little bit more progressive, and that progressive shock helps with the suspension on that bike. So there you have it. Best thing you can do, Float X2. I'm telling you, try those settings and you will love the shock. It will completely transform your bike and the way you're riding. I hope this video helps with you guys. I'm trying to do more of these, so if you have any questions or comments, leave them. I always read them and I'm happy to answer them for you. And I will see you guys on the next video.